Hey chiropractors, we're ready for another modern chiropractic marketing show with Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing strategies, content marketing, direct response marketing, and business development with some of the leading experts in the industry.
Hey docs, welcome to another episode. Today's kind of a coaching call. I got Dr. Matthew Stay, who is joining us, and we dive into his transition from learning from his mentor before chiropractic school, working for his mentor, taking a break from that, and then ultimately buying his mentor's practice and actually the real estate. But then how that transition can be a struggle, right? When you really open up the kimono of someone else's practice that you have purchased, and you need to, try to seamlessly transition that practice as easy as possible, without losing a lot of patients. We dive into some of the struggles he's had, some of the benefits, some of the positives of buying a practice versus starting from scratch. I think if you are, no matter what stage you're in, this episode is going to be beneficial for you. You know, if you're a chiropractor that already owns your practice, and you're not looking to buy anything else, it still could be helpful to maybe learn how you could prepare your practice for a sale down the road to make it easier for the person purchasing it. If you're an associate, this will be great to hear. If you're new to it, even if you're starting your own practice, it's a lot of good information here that Doc talks about. And so we dive into kind of a coaching call around transitioning a practice, around purchasing from another doctor, especially one, this particular doctor has been established for quite a few years, and what that looks like. So enjoy this episode with Dr. Matthew Stay. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Matt. I really appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to diving into a topic that's kind of new and needed. We're going to dive into taking over a practice that has been established for years, and now you're the owner. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about yourself personally and professionally, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me on the show. Big fan, and I've picked up a lot of value from this over the last couple of years that I've been listening. And but yeah, my story. I was an athlete in high school and had a pretty severe wrestling injury that kind of led me into chiropractic. And as fate would have it, my dad wrestled with the local chiropractor when he was in high school, so that was a no-brainer. When I had to be on the mat to wrestle, he's like, "Well, you're going to go see Dr. Lee." Mm-hmm. And honestly, two adjustments was all I needed, and I was back on the mat, and I was like, "Wow, this is what I want to do." Mm-hmm. And my Dr. Lee, the chiropractor that I just mentioned, he kind of took me under his wing, was my mentor through the whole thing. And as I was going through school, I always was talking with him. I precepted with him while I was still in school. I associated with him, and mm-hmm. It just kind of evolved into, hey, Matt, when I'm ready to retire, you want to take this over? And mm-hmm. I mean, it's in my hometown, and it made sense. And here we are. So 2019 there, right before COVID, that was when he was ready to pull the trigger on his retirement. And mm-hmm. So I stepped in, and of course, we all know what happened after that.
Yeah. The timing was interesting for sure. But Where are you at? Where are you located exactly?
Oh, yes. I'm south of Pittsburgh, actually kind of right between Pittsburgh and Morgantown, right up off of I-79. So
I can tell by the accent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just small town area, blue collar coal mining town. Yeah, it's a good place, but we are very limited in a lot of our resources because of being the area. But
being born and raised down in South Florida, I've become an expert in accents. We have everybody down here.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I was actually born and raised for the first part of my life in LA, but my family originally being from southwestern PA, we moved back here when I was a little bit younger, and I never thought I had the accent, but apparently I'm wrong.
Yeah, you got it. You got it for sure. But how long were you an associate for Dr. Lee before you took over?
I graduated Palmer College in Davenport 2013, February of 2013, and I started associated with him for a couple years right out. And then I had a couple opportunities to work in an integrated clinic where we had physical therapists, the nurse practitioners, osteopaths, which was a cool experience. You got to see a lot of the other side of the medical profession and how they work, and be able to work in conjunction with them, which was invaluable. And then I got back to my roots. I worked at another chiropractic office, and then Dr. Lee called up there October of 2019, said, "Hey, I'm ready to make this move." So that's where we're at now.
You were not the actual associate at that office that then bought and transitioned out. You had left, you were at a different clinic, so you're coming back kind of fresh to the clinic, correct?
Yeah. He never, like, I was the last associate that he had. When I left, he just continued on as a solo practitioner. And when I left, like, that was, again, that conversation was already in place. Like, hey, whenever I'm ready, let's, just, so that, yeah, I feel like I got complacent with that. I slacked off of my continuing education because I was like, hey, this practice is going to be available for me and I can do what he's doing. And that's where we're at.
Okay. And then did you purchase it from him?
Yep. I purchased the practice and the real estate as well.
Oh, good. So you get the combo deal.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's a great way of doing it. So that's a great start. But
yeah.
How's that been managing both things?
That for me, I had a little bit of background, working with some real estate and that, not really just understanding how that worked, how the business end of that worked. And, he initially offered me to just rent. And, once I realized that I could purchase the whole thing, that was a no brainer. It's like renting, your apartment. Like, I'd rather build equity than.
Perfect. Smart move. Okay. So then you walk in. Was there a transition period of time where he stuck around to kind of transition the practice to you?
Yeah. So the final takeover, the papers were signed in October, but I come back to the office in, I think, June of that year, and worked through June, July, August, September with the doctor, transitioning. And again, the transition wasn't too bad because most of the patients were familiar with me. I mean, I still lived 5 minutes from the office, just worked elsewhere. Again, small towns, everybody seems to know everybody's business. And so that made that easy. People were already familiar with me because I've worked here before, and just being around in the community made that pretty easy from that standpoint. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that helps. There's a lot of different variables when you purchase an existing practice. And how many years was this practice in business?
Oh, well, it was established in 1987.
He's a very well-established practice. And so he's obviously made a lot of roots there, but it can be tricky if you're moving to an area you have no idea about. Plenty of people do it, but obviously at least you had that going for you where you were familiar with the practice somewhat and familiar with the areas. That's good.
Yeah, definitely.
But on the flip side, what are some of the things you found challenging with transitioning a well-established older practice into you being the owner and the only doctor there?
Well, I think first and foremost is, being true to myself. When I started this transition of, becoming the owner, I just felt like I was just going to continue on the path that the previous doctor had established and just, build on that reputation, which is, of course, I want to do that. But I think I tried too hard to be him and what the patients expected of him. Yeah. And I think COVID was actually a pretty good thing, if they could say that's a good thing, because, well, we slowed down a lot and I was able to start that transition and have the patients kind of get used to me and how I was running things. But you still get a lot of that pushback, and when change is hard, and I recognize that. But the big thing I'm just trying to do is offer different solutions to complement the adjustment.
Now, would you say it was mostly clinical that was different, or was there also a component of personality where was it a personality driven practice that he had and then you come in with a different type of personality, or was it a little bit of both?
I'd say a little bit of both, but more on I think more on the clinical aspect. My predecessor, he was trained in a lot of the rehab processes. And when I was working with him, we tried to utilize that because we had two doctors in the office. But, ultimately, I think he had his system, the things that worked well for him.
Yeah.
And, again, as an associate or as someone, as an outsider looking in, like, oh, man, this is a great practice. And having the experience working in it, like I just felt I could just jump in and do that. And that was a big eye opener for me, is realizing that I have to be true to myself. And I have to, show patients that this is other options. And that's been the struggle. It definitely has been the struggle.
Okay. So basically a lot of them were not getting rehab, and now you're applying a lot of the rehab model to the practice, correct?
Yeah. And, this last summer, we actually did a little remodel within the office to help make that a little bit more fluid so that I could adjust, walk out the room, and boom, there's our exercise area. We can just transition to that, which before it wasn't set up that way. And there was a lot of me running around and kind of trying to find all my equipment and stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something I was going to say. Is sometimes, often a rehab model is going to take a different space requirement than a non-rehab model. And so sometimes I've had, practitioners not be able to really do the rehab they want to because of that. But obviously you were able to do that. So that's a great step, right? If your model is going to require a certain type of spacing, go ahead and invest the capital in doing the renovations to do that. So I'm glad you did that, because, a lot of people forget about it, but space and equipment tend to be a huge limiting factor in their practice model. And it sounds like you've squared that away.
Well, to be honest, before my predecessor bought this building, it was an archery range. So there was plenty of space here.
That's awesome. How about your staff? Like, what does your staff look like right now?
So it's me, and I have an office manager and a CA who runs the front desk. And I'll be honest, I couldn't have even dreamed of having two better girls working for me.
Perfect.
And we work so well together. And full disclosure, my office manager, she's my cousin, but we're literally 5 days apart and grew up, with each other. So we might as well be brother and sister.
Perfect. So you got someone that's got a vested interest there.
Correct. And she's a certified X-ray technician, which helps me out a lot there when I need patients who have to have X-rays. And it's really a perfect setup. Like I said, we work very well together. We're very highly motivated and for the changes that we're bringing in the office, and my staff, they understand that. They see the possibilities of, and the outcomes that can come of that if we, stick to the plans. And so, it's great. I cannot complain about that at all.
And then you do the rehab with the patients, or do you have someone that does it for you?
Yeah, I do it with the patients. Yeah. We're seeing about 120 patients a week. And again, a lot of these patients have transitioned from the old owner to me, and a lot of these patients, and all they need is an adjustment. We have a lot of patients that come in, once a month, once every 2 or 3 weeks, and they get adjusted. They feel great. They go out the door. And to be honest, the less we have to do, the better. But unfortunately, when you have and just as well as I do, you have this patient coming in with this chronic lower back pain. One sacral adjustment might not cut it. We might need to support that. We might need to get you moving a little bit. We treat a lot of Medicare patients who, unfortunately, don't do a whole lot for themselves. Like, they live very sedentary lifestyles. They're oftentimes not even willing to try to do some exercises. And that's been a struggle there.
Okay. And then one of the things that I want to touch on here, because, when you buy someone else's practice, the financials play a big role in that. And those financials don't always tell the full story. And in one way is that if you're taking over a practice that's like manipulation based, and they're able to see 8 people in an hour, and they're getting X amount of dollars per visit. And then a chiropractor comes in, buys it, and goes into a rehab model and is spending 20, 30 minutes with the patient, getting similar or maybe just a little bit more reimbursement because of the exercise, but not a lot. That can be a tough transition to go from one to the other and keep up the same level of revenue and profits. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
100%. And that, and again, that's been another internal struggle of mine, because, look, we've got to make money. We've got to stay afloat. I've got business loans to pay that, so we got to make sure we're turning a profit. But at the same time, I want to give quality care. And I think that part of me is really driving the bus, which that's what I want. That's definitely what I want, because the quality of care is more important than making, $1 million a year or whatever.
Yeah, but in the same regard, sometimes if you're not careful, if you change it too drastically, then you're running into cash flow issues and you start hemorrhaging money. And I've seen that with other chiropractors. So you got to look at what the model was, what the model you're looking to do, and if the math is going to add up. Again, if he's getting $50 a visit and seeing 8 in an hour, and then you're getting 65 a visit and seeing 3 in an hour, you're losing money each hour that was in the P&Ls that you saw that you bought, right? So you bought a different product than that you have now. And so you have to be careful. And again, I'm all for evidence-based care and offering the best care, but you've got to really look at it and say, okay, can I see more people an hour, spend a little bit less time per se, if it makes sense, and can I afford to hire like a rehab CA, so someone to do the rehab? So your practice has the rehab, but you're not doing it because what would you say he was seeing in a week? How many? You're seeing about 120. How many was he seeing in a week when he was coming along?
I think when, right at the takeover, it was about 170 a week. Yeah. And to be honest, there was a time even as recent as last summer where I was up, my 6-week average is at 170 patients a week. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, again, I don't necessarily want to blame the pandemic, but we had to shut our doors for a few weeks. For a few days recently, with just a high number of cases in the area, patients calling, being exposed, testing positive. And, from the public perspective, the public optics, like, you don't want to be that office, especially in a small town. That's, hey, yeah, we're open. Who cares about COVID? I mean, you got to be aware of that. You have to be in tune to that. And, the last thing I want is to hurt the reputation.
All right, docs, here is a new opportunity for you from Darcy Sullivan of Propel. She is our SEO specialist in helping out many chiropractors with their search engine optimization and making sure Google is finding you and getting you new patients. It's amazing how many new patients chiropractors can get and are getting when they do the SEO right and a few other things. And Darcy is offering a free SEO workshop just for chiropractors, and you can sign up for that at bit.ly/propelmcm. That is bit.ly/propelmcm, Modern Chiropractic Marketing, right? And so check out that link, and we're going to have you go over 5 SEO secrets to owning the first page of Google without buying ads. And Darcy's going to give that free workshop, 1 hour, to really help grow your practice and start churning new patients from the ever mighty Google, which is still king in the online marketing. So check that out at bit.ly/propelmcm for the 1 hour free workshop. Yeah, that's reality for sure. But, I just want the audience out there to realize, like, if you're going to take over a practice and you're going to invest the money into it, get an understanding of the practice model they had, how that lines up, what the practice financials were, what's the practice financials going to look under your model. Right. And that's the ethical situation we see with the transition being a problem from a cash flow standpoint. Then there's an unethical, and this has nothing to do with your practice, but I'm just bringing it up for the audience's sake, and I've talked to chiropractors in the past that have run into this situation where they never looked under the hood of the practice. They saw the financials, but then once they take it over, realize like, oh, okay, there was, huge care plans being sold, and I don't want to do that anymore. There was unethical billing happening. And so the money that's coming in really isn't legitimate. There's definitely things happening in certain scenarios where you're taking over an you basically bought an unethically practiced office. And so those billings aren't really what they should have been. And then that chiropractor comes in, does things the right way, and realizes like, well, I'm seeing the same amount of people, but my cash flow is down 25, 30, 40%. Why is that? You look under the hood and see, well, shit wasn't going the way it should have been here. And I didn't realize that. Again, I'm not saying that's happening in yours. I'm just saying that's what I've heard of. And I want my audience to be aware of that.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, and again, that wasn't what was happening here.
Yeah.
I had, the fortune of working in the office and seeing the day-to-day operations and how we billed for patients, and
Hmm.
how we applied charges for our services. And to be honest, I think he was probably even underbilling a little
Yep.
bit.
Hmm.
And maybe that has something to do, with previous experiences he had. I don't
Well,
know.
let's talk about that. Let me chime in on that because another thing that happens is, especially when you're in a smaller town, you've been around for a long time, you got all these deals with people, right? Like, well, Bob's my plumber, he doesn't get charged. I bought my car from him and gave me a deal, so he doesn't get charged. Or this person's got a cash rate because of that. Like, there's all these things that happen in practices, and again, not saying it happened in yours, but I'm sure there's like, I mean, every practice has these little oddities. And then you come in and you talk to Bob. It's like, well, Bob, this is the price, and we're and so I'm sure there's been some of those conversations, right?
Oh, certainly.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, again, the small town mentality, like that, there
Hmm.
is a fine balance. Like, you don't want to piss a bunch of people off because they're
Yeah.
tell everyone, hey, look, this chiropractor, he's charging me for this, and the old chiropractor didn't do
Hmm.
that. There is a delicate balance, I feel, with
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
navigating that is certainly a challenge. I think when you build the rapport with patients, you can really fill that out a little bit more. And
Hmm.
for me, again, being fortunate that you know this is my chiropractor when I was in high school. He was
Hmm.
my boss right out of school. I live in the area, so a lot of the patients were familiar with me and knew me. So I think that transition was a little bit easier for me,
Yep.
but I could certainly see how that would be a big problem for
Hmm.
someone who's not from that area
Yeah, and
or
that's
has no
why.
experience in that area.
Yeah, that's why, like, when practice specialists give a valuation of a practice, there's a lot of variables, and that's
Yeah.
why typically an associate, especially when it's been there for a while, if they buy the practice and they are treating most of the patients already, that's the best case scenario. That's got the least risk involved because the
Mhm.
doctor's been there for 5, 10, whatever years and can really already is part of the practice. That's usually
Right.
the
Yeah.
best. And then obviously the hardest is when someone new comes in and takes over. But you're kind of a little bit more in the middle, which was good
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
to do that. So let's switch gears back to you being more rehab based. Did you find a fair amount of the patients that you tried to convert from the old model to the new model were hesitant and really resistant to that?
Yeah, I think there was certainly some of that. When we decided to just dive into this and make the changes to the office, some of the remodeling that we made a decision that all of our new patients, this is what they're doing. Okay, we're gonna do a thorough exam. We're gonna put them, find out what their, the low hanging fruit is, if you will, and we're going to mobilize the restricted joints, and we're going to rehab the areas that is going to help them overcome this problem. And for us, that was easy because the new patients, they had no experience prior to us, me taking over, so they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And that's actually been beneficial, because now I'm working with a new patient in the therapy room, and all of a sudden, an older, one of the patients that transitioned from the previous owner is seeing me do these exercises. They're like, wow, man, this help me? I'm like, well, we got to examine you. We got to do this. We got to check you out because,
Mhm.
we've just been doing our adjustments. You come in for your monthly maintenance and things are going to change. So we got to make sure what we're doing is going to be specific for your needs.
Good. I
So
like
I
it.
think that, yeah, and that's definitely helped. But, like I said before, I feel that the least that we have to do, the better,
Hmm. Hmm.
and getting back to your previous point, when you're talking about how I might only be able to see 3 in an hour compared
Hmm.
to 8 in an hour with just your come in, adjust, and
Hmm.
get them out the door. Well, that's with our staff, we've really tried to make it a point to know our patients and know what their needs are, so
Yeah.
that when this patient who has been with the practice for 30 years just wants to come in and get adjusted, we try to schedule him when we've got a few other rehab
Hmm.
patients.
Hmm.
And so and I mean, that's in a perfect world that works 100% of the time, but that doesn't always work out. But that's what we try to do. Try to really know who our patients are and put them in places where they're not going to be waiting a whole lot of time because I'm working with other patients.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, I got a question for you. Aside from transitioning into more of the rehab model, is there any other big struggle that I can help you out with in this process of transitioning?
Oh boy, how much time do you have?
About 10 more
I
minutes.
mean,
No, just
yeah. No, a lot of it is mindset for
kidding.
me. I've heard you reference it several times on your podcast, like that poverty mindset,
Hmm.
and that's something I certainly struggle with. And again, coming back to that small town mentality,
Hmm.
I don't. I love these people. Like, I'm in the place that I am because of the people in my community. So the least I can do is give back to them. But
Hmm.
I have to realize that I'm running a business, and
Yeah.
I wish we could do everything free. I wish every insurance paid everything and nobody had to pay anything out of pocket. But it's just not the world that we live in.
No.
That's been a big struggle of mine, and
Hmm.
I think like other things, just in terms of having a systematic approach to healthcare. Like you said, I'm trying to integrate all this, but trying to learn a lot of things on the fly of best practices. When should I apply this technique? When can I apply this technique? And I listened to Winchester and Taylor Premer on the Gestalt Education Show, and I think that's fantastic for a lot of the clinical aspects. And I've gotten a
Definitely.
lot from them too. But
So
yeah, I mean, that's just kind of putting it all together, I guess.
let's talk about the poverty mindset thing, or just the money for a minute. Who discusses the finances with the patients in your practice?
Well, my office manager during the report, she goes in and does and handles all that. But all of us, we support that. I might, when I'm doing the report, I'll start to allude to this, like, okay, this is what we're doing. And Amanda, she's my office manager. Amanda's going to come in and she's going to go over the finances a little bit more thoroughly, go over any discounts we're able to offer, blah 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 blah. But we always make sure we're supporting that, whatever that patient's financial responsibility is, and
Perfect.
whatever their insurance claims that they're going to pay for, or what.
I love getting the doctor out of the finances,
Yeah,
right? Like whenever
100%.
whenever
Yeah.
I give a report of findings or anything like that and talk to the patient, if they bring up money, I say, okay, Kayla, who's our front, is going to go over all that with you. I got to give you my recommendations based on your diagnosis, my experience in treating this. And I can't
Mhm.
really take into, time, money, and travel into it. I'd be doing a
Mhm.
disservice to do that.
Sure.
So I just really try to keep the money conversation separately. And so I want you to just consider setting a very fair fee schedule. Don't make it too low. Don't make it high. Make it very fair. Understand that insurance is what it is. And so, make sure if you're doing extra spinal manipulation because they need it, bill for it. If they've got it in network deductible, get the money from them on that. Like, just set a very fair fee schedule, provide a great service to them. That's giving back to them in a sense. And then the money will take care of itself. Don't, get consumed by it. And then when your profits become very handsome, that will then give you an even greater ability to give back to the community in other ways, right? Like in charitable events and sponsorships and all that type of stuff. I think that's the way to go about it, in my opinion. And charge what you're worth, and people will respect you for that.
Yeah, and to kind of comment on that too, that's certainly one thing our whole office has worked with. I'll be honest, we started using Kyra Health USA
Yep.
in a way to kind of help offset some of these, the dual fee schedule, issue,
Mhm.
but also, you know, show patients that, like, okay, your insurance doesn't cover these reevals. This is time that we're taking
Yep.
out of our day. We got to charge you for this.
Yes, exactly.
And that's helped us as a staff, like with that poverty mindset. Like, look, we're worth a little bit more than
Mhm.
what we've been getting. And again, within a kind of a poorer area that we work in,
Mhm.
Car Health USA makes sense, or any DMPO or whatever kind of
Mhm.
company helps to offset that potential dual fee schedule or whatever.
Good.
But yeah,
Good.
I think that's been good for us, but still continuing
Mhm.
to just understand our value and what we're able to do for our
Mhm.
community.
Well, I think inherently you've had a slow transition since you bought, which is good in a sense, because I think one of the mistakes I see is the new chiropractor comes in and just pulls a rug out from under everybody and just does a complete 180 on stuff. And that tends to be very difficult to manage. And
Mhm.
so I think just like you want a nice transition from the owning doctor, like to stay on board for a little bit. Once he is gone, you need to start picking and choosing your battle slowly in the transition, right? And then get, know what your end goal is and put a time on it. Like, okay, in the next 6 to 12 months, I want to, everything's been delayed for you a little bit because of COVID, but, just say something like over the 6 to 12 months, this is where I really want to get the practice to be to where it's congruent with me. It's, I'm being honest with myself as a practitioner and how I want to run things. Like, this is where I want to get to. So you can slowly make those changes. So where it's not a kind of shock to the system and all of a sudden you start hemorrhaging cash flow. So I would recommend that for docs out there, is to try to do it that way is typically better. Then the next recommendation I would have is, and let me ask a question as we go into it, is how has your communication been with the patients through all these different types of changes?
Oh, well, I have a tendency to be pretty long-winded. One of my major tenets is patient education, and I think I might even over educate sometimes, but along those lines, like even with the transition, like that's, hey, Mary, we have some changes coming up here in the office. This might be something that works better for you. And we try to be upfront with absolutely everything when it comes to finances, recommendations. Yeah, I believe in transparency. And I mean, we all know that the medical community at large can be a little shady with some of their billing practices, and that to me is the worst thing you can do, and I would never want to do that to any of my patients. So everything we do, regardless financial, like I said, or treatment wise or whatever, we're very upfront with our patients.
Perfect. That's the way to do it for sure. Now, since you took over, have you done any new marketing for the practice that wasn't done before?
So that's another great question. Well, I'm currently in the middle of your marketing, doing it right, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So, when I purchased the office, there wasn't any external marketing going on. And I took some shots at some Facebook ads and Google ads. I wasn't specific. I wasn't specific to the message I wanted to get out there. And that's something that I realize now. So, currently I'm not doing any external marketing. Everything is internal because I want to build that marketing plan based on what the office is going to look like 12 months from now.
Yep.
And, and I'm fortunate enough to be, tapped into a lot of the local youth athletics. There's a big Division II college right down the road from me that I have a lot of connections with. I've treated some of the coaches there, but in my mindset, and again, this is my internal struggle, I don't want to go and market a practice that isn't what I want it to be yet. And I just don't feel that I'm quite where I want to be, maybe skill set wise.
Okay.
To be able to market that
yeah, and you and I emailed about that, where you are in the process of still building your skill set around this rehab model, which is great. And I've talked through chiropractors of trying to rebrand, and the few that I have, they've done it the right way, because you can't just rebrand to let's call it a sports chiropractic practice or such, right, without having the skill set to do it. And so they took the time and effort to get certified in certain courses that would really give them the skill set to do that versus just kind of fake it till you make it. But I commend you on not only transitioning the practice into more of a rehab model or a sports-based model, but also transitioning yourself into that fully, and you'll get there in time. So that's cool to see.
Yeah, it's, just keep grinding, man. And, I had the background and, kind of coming back to like what I said before, like I got complacent. When I was in school, I was in the rehab department and I worked under some very bright minds, and I went to MPI, club classes and things like that. But I had that mental block. It's like, I have a mentor who's going to show me everything I need to know. And that's 100% on me. I for whatever reason, I needed a kick in the ass to help me realize what I need to be doing outside of patient care.
Cool. And then just a last little tidbit on the marketing thing. I think a really great opportunity for those that are taking over practices, especially ones that are established, is you're buying a great foundation. That's why it's typically easier to buy a practice than starting your own from scratch, because it's got a great foundation. You just got to tweak some things strategically. But then most of those types of practices, honestly, don't have effective marketing. And so if you can come in and then layer on really effective marketing and community outreach with that great foundation that you purchased, the growth can be pretty quick and exponential. I've got a few clients right now that are in your shoes, but a little further along. And it was great situations for them. So that's the positive. So my last recommendation for you would be is to, whatever you're doing for marketing now, double that, and you'll really close that gap. And you'll start, especially if you go through that audience builder tool that's in the book and work through that and get super clear on your positioning, and you start hammering that, you'll start molding the patient base that's more congruent to you than say the existing patients that were there that were more congruent to him. Right. So I think that's a key thing to start doing. Okay.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Anything else I can help you out with today?
Oh, no, man. I really appreciate, you having me here. And I think this has been, invaluable for me. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, definitely. Keep me posted on everything. And just to summarize, is to make sure your communication is super effective, make sure you're getting your billing all squared away appropriately, and then start really doubling down on the marketing efforts. And I think you'll overcome that transition obstacle and that COVID obstacle, and you'll do great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Modern Chiropractic Marketing Show. Before you leave, make sure you check out our website. We've got blogs and podcasts and all kinds of great info at www.modernchiropracticmarketing.com. We also have a closed Facebook group of the same name where a lot of like-minded chiropractors are workshopping ideas and making sure that we have this continual advancement of marketing, business, mindset, and just growth of your practice. So check us out, modernchiropracticmarketing.com, and the Facebook group of the same name.